My son took my card and said my pension was his. But the bank had a surprise that made him cry. That's a sentence I never thought would come out of my mouth. But here I am, heartbroken and my dignity crushed. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never expected to share. If any part of this feels familiar, please just leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep letting this all out. It was a Tuesday in October in Chicago, and the golden autumn leaves were scattered across Lincoln Park like small lost coins. I, named Eleanor Parker, years old, walked slowly toward the bank with my wooden cane. It was the same one my late husband, William Parker, had carved for me with his own hands before he passed. The weight of my years felt heavier that day, not because of my age, but because of the invisible burden I carried in my heart. My apartment on Clark Street smelled like lavender and coffee, as always. The walls were full of photographs of my two children. Michael, the elder one, with that smile that used to melt my heart, and Laura, my baby girl, who barely called me anymore. On the center of the dining table, on the embroidered tablecloth my mother had given me for my wedding, lay my debit card next to the envelope where I kept the statements for my retired teacher's pension each month. I had worked years at St. Jude's High School teaching geometry to generations of Chicago kids. My net worth wasn't a huge fortune, but my savings in dollars, accumulated penny by penny, represented a lifetime of sacrifices. I had never invested in the stock market or understood bitcoins or cryptocurrency like young people do now. My capital was simple but honest. My monthly pension of dollar and savings of dollar that I had managed to put together by denying myself small luxuries for decades. That morning, as I prepared my breakfast of whole wheat toast with butter and a latte, I heard a key turn in the lock. Michael Parker walked in with that familiarity only children have when they believe their parents' house belongs to them by right. "Good morning, Mom," he said, but his tone didn't have the warmth it used to. His eyes, which once shone with joy upon seeing me, now scanned me as if I were a problem to be solved. "Son, what a surprise. Do you want some coffee?" I offered, as I had done thousands of times since he was little. "I don't have time for that," he replied curtly, heading straight for the table where my card was. "I came for this." Without any ceremony, he took my debit card and put it in the pocket of his designer jacket. One I knew cost more than I spent on clothes in an entire year. "Michael, what are you doing?" "That's my card," I said, feeling my throat go dry. He turned to me with a look I didn't recognize. It was the look of a stranger, cold and calculating. "Mom, it's time for someone responsible to handle your finances. You are no longer at an age to manage so much money." "So much money, Michael. It's my pension, the result of my whole life working." "Yes, and that's exactly why you can't go around giving it away to everyone. I've seen you give money to Mrs. Reynolds from apartment B when she can't pay her electricity bill, or how you buy medicine for Mr. Carter from A That has to stop. His words hit me like icy daggers. For years, I had helped my neighbors because I understood what it was like to live on a pension that barely covered the basics. My small acts of solidarity hadn't been extravagance, they had been humanity. They are my neighbors, Michael. They were good to me when your father died, when I was sick. That's in the past, Mom. Now you have to think about your future and your families. My family, I asked, although a part of me already feared the answer. Laura and I have been talking. We think it's better if we manage your money. That way, you ensure you don't lack anything and we can plan better. The world seemed to wobble under my feet. Laura was involved in this too. My little girl, whom I had raised from a baby, whom I had held in my arms during her feverish nights, whom I had comforted through every teenage heartbreak. Plan for what, Michael? Well, Mom, let's be realistic. You're years old now. We don't know how much longer you'll need this care. And frankly, maintaining this apartment is very costly. We've seen some very good assisted living facilities where you'd be better taken care of. The word assisted living echoed in my mind like a death sentence. They weren't places of care that my son had in mind, but places to deposit parents who had become a burden. Michael, this is my home. All my memories are here. I lived here with your father. Memories don't pay the bills, Mom. And Dad isn't here anymore. You have to be practical. In that moment, as I watched my son put away my card as if it were his by right, I felt something fundamental break inside me. It wasn't just my heart. It was the image I had built over years about what family meant, what filial love meant, what respect for parents meant. And what if I don't agree? I asked in a whispery voice. Michael smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who held all the cards. Mom, don't be difficult. Laura and I just want what's best for you. Trust us. Without further ceremony, he headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned around one last time. Oh, and Mom, I already changed the card's pin for more security. You understand? The door closed with a soft click, but to me, it sounded like the slamming shut that separates one life from another. I stood there in my kitchen, looking at the empty space where my card had been for years. The coffee had gone cold in the cup. The toast remained untouched on the plate, and I felt like something much more valuable than money had been stolen from me. My dignity had been stolen. That afternoon, sitting in my green velvet armchair, looking at the photographs of my children on the wall, I wondered when exactly I had stopped being their mother and had become their source of income. When had my care and sacrifices turned into an investment they now expected to cash out? Tears streamed down my wrinkled cheeks as the October sun set behind the buildings of Chicago, taking with it not only the daylight, but also the last bit of hope I had in the goodness of my own children. The following days were a silent torture. Each morning, I woke up hoping it had all been a nightmare, but reality hit me when I saw the empty space on the table where my card used to rest. Michael didn't show up again, but his absence was more eloquent than any visit. On Friday afternoon, as I was trying to read the newspaper to distract myself, the doorbell rang. It was Laura. My heart sped up, thinking that perhaps she had come to comfort me, to tell me it had all been a misunderstanding, that she hadn't known anything about what her brother had done. "Hi, Mom," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Can I come in?" "Of course, honey. You'll always be welcome in your home." Laura came in and sat on the sofa with a studied elegance. She wore a wool coat that I recognized immediately. It had cost more than $1. I knew because she had asked me for money to buy it last year, telling me it was for an important job interview. "Mom, I need to talk to you about what happened with Michael." I felt a momentary relief. Finally, someone was going to defend my rights, to tell me that what my elder son had done was wrong. "Oh, Laura, you don't know how bad your brother made me feel. I don't understand how he could." "Mom," she interrupted me firmly, "Michael did the right thing." The world stopped. Laura's words echoed in my ears like a distorted sound. Had I heard correctly? "What did you say, honey?" "Michael did the right thing." "Mom, you're not a young woman anymore. The other day, Mrs. Reynolds told me you gave her $1 for her surgery. Are you crazy? That woman is not our family." "Laura, Mrs. Reynolds helped me for months when your father was sick. She brought me groceries when I couldn't go out. She stayed with me at the hospital. That was her decision, Mom. No one asked her to. But you can't just give away money that isn't only yours." "What do you mean it's not only mine? It's my pension. I worked years to earn it." Laura sighed impatiently, as if she were explaining something elementary to a silly child. "Mom, let's be honest. You can't manage your finances alone. Last month, you spent $1 on medicine for Mr. Carter. Before that, it was $1 for the family downstairs who lost their jobs. Where is this going to stop?" "It's going to stop at helping people who need it, Laura, at being human." "No, Mom. It's going to stop at us not having the resources to give you real care when you truly need it. Have you thought about that?" Laura's words hurt me more than Michael's, because they were wrapped in an apparently motherly logic, as if she were the responsible adult, and I were a capricious old woman. "Besides," she continued, "Michael and I have been reviewing your expenses. Mom, this apartment costs you $1 a month, just in HOA fees and utilities. It's too much for one person alone. But all my memories are here, Laura. You were born here. Here, memories don't pay for themselves, Mom. And frankly, living alone at your age is dangerous. What if you fall and no one finds out? What if you have a health problem in the middle of the night?" Every one of Laura's arguments sounded reasonable on the surface, but underneath, I could feel something darker, the cold calculation of someone who had already decided my future without consulting me. "So, what do you propose, honey?" "We've seen a very good assisted living facility in Evanston. St. Joseph's is the name. It's specifically for older people. They have activities, hour nursing, prepared meals. You would be much better taken care of. Assisted living. Laura, I don't want to go to an assisted living facility. Mom, don't be selfish. Think about us too. Michael has 2 small children. I'm trying to buy a condo with Daniel. We need our family resources to be managed intelligently. The word selfish pierced me like a bullet. I who had spent my youth raising them, who had worked double shifts to pay for their college education, who had mortgaged my house to give Michael the money for the down payment on his business, who had taken care of Laura's kids every weekend for years so she could go out with her friends. I was the selfish one. Laura, do you really think I'm selfish? For a moment, I saw a flash of the girl she used to be. A second of doubt in her eyes, but it quickly disappeared. Mom, it's not that you're selfish by nature. It's that at your age, people become different, more attached to things, less able to see the big picture. The big picture? Yes, the picture where everyone wins. The facility costs $1 a month, but by selling this apartment and managing your savings and pension well, we can cover those expenses and still have something left over for family emergencies. There it was, the truth, naked and raw. It wasn't about my well-being. It was about turning my assets into cash. My apartment, bought with the sweat of 4 decades of work, was just an asset to be converted to cash. And what if I don't want to, Laura? The question hung in the air like a threat. Laura got up from the sofa and walked to the window, turning her back to me. Mom, Michael and I have spoken with a lawyer. Given your condition, well, your advanced age, and some questionable financial decisions you've made, we could request guardianship. The word guardianship chilled my blood. I knew what it meant. That my own children could legally declare me incapable of managing my life and my assets. What questionable decisions? Well, the cash gifts to neighbors, the fact that you keep $1 in a normal checking account instead of investing it to generate dividends, your refusal to modernize your lifestyle. Everything had a twisted logic that made me dizzy. My acts of generosity had become proof of mental incapacity. My preference for financial simplicity was evidence of incompetence. My love for my home was a symptom of silly. Patricia, do you really believe I'm not in my right mind? She turned to me with an expression that tried to be compassionate, but failed to hide her impatience. Mom, it's not that you're not in your right mind. It's that you need help, and we want to give it to you by taking away my house, my money, and my freedom. By giving you security, Mom, peace of mind, a place where you don't have to worry about anything. That afternoon, after Patricia left with kisses on my cheeks and promises to talk soon, I sat in my armchair and cried until I ran out of tears. They weren't only tears of sadness. They were tears of rage, helplessness, and betrayal. I had raised 2 children thinking that love was unconditional, that family meant mutual support, protection, respect. But I discovered that for David and Patricia, I had been a long-term investment. They now wanted to cash out. That night, as the rain beat against my window panes, I understood that I no longer had children. I had two strangers with my last name who had calculated the value of my living death. The following Monday, when I went to the corner grocery store, Mrs. Kelly, the cashier who had known me for years, looked at me strangely. "Mrs. Baker, your card was declined." The heat of shame rose up my neck. I had tried to buy just the basics: milk, bread, some fruit, not even $1 worth of groceries. "It must be a bank error," I muttered as I put the products back and left the store with my cheeks burning. On the way home, I realized that David hadn't just taken control of my money. He had taken away the dignity of being a respectable customer in my own neighborhood. The following weeks were the darkest of my life. David had completely blocked my access to my own funds, and every day became a struggle to maintain basic dignity. Those dollars that I had accumulated penny by penny during decades of work as a teacher were now out of my reach, controlled by a son who had decided that I no longer had a right to my own life. On Tuesday morning, as I was trying to stretch the few bills I had hidden in a cookie jar in the kitchen, the phone rang. It was an unknown voice, formal and distant. "Mrs. Carol Baker, this is Annabelle from St. Joseph's Assisted Living in Evston. Your children have made a reservation for you, and we need to confirm some data." My heart stopped. Without consulting me, without my consent, David and Patricia had already taken the next step. "Excuse me, there must be a mistake. I haven't applied for a spot in any facility. According to our records, your son, David Baker, has already paid the reservation, and the first 2 months in advance. We need you to come sign the admission papers for next Monday." Next Monday, I repeated like an echo, feeling my vision blur. "Yes, Mom. We also need you to bring your medical records. Your children informed us that you have some memory problems and need constant supervision." Memory problems. Constant supervision. My mind, which had taught complex mathematics for 4 decades, which could recite the birthdays of all my neighbors from memory, which remembered every detail of my children's childhoods, was now being declared deficient by those same children. "Miss, I think there has been a very big confusion." "Don't worry, Mrs. Baker. It's normal to feel confused at first, but you're going to be very well cared for here. We have recreational activities, permanent medical attention, and your family can visit you whenever they wish." I hung up the phone with trembling hands. Whenever they wish. Not when I wanted to see them, but when it was convenient for them. I had been officially converted into a burden that is deposited in a safe place, so they can continue with their real lives without inconvenience. That same afternoon, David showed up at my door with a folder full of documents. He was accompanied by a man in a suit who introduced himself as Mr. Johnson, a lawyer specializing in family law. "Mom, this is Mr. Johnson. He's going to help us make the transition as easy as possible for everyone." "What transition?" The lawyer smiled with that professional smile I had seen at banks when they explain why you can't access your own money. Mrs. Baker, your children have explained the situation to me. I understand that you are going through a difficult time, but we have prepared everything to ensure your future. David spread the documents on my dining table, the same table where I had helped my children with their homework for years, where we had celebrated birthdays and holidays, where Arthur and I had planned our retirement dreams. Mom, we need you to sign these papers. They are for the sale of the apartment and to establish a trust to manage your assets more efficiently. Sell the apartment. David, this is my house. It was your house, Mom, but now you're going to have a beautiful room at St. Joseph's with a garden view and everything. You don't need to maintain this unnecessary expense. Mr. Johnson cleared his throat and began to explain with legal jargon. I barely understood something about asset optimization, about generating a higher return on my capital, about protecting my assets from possible bad future decisions. You see, Mrs. Baker, by selling the apartment, we can invest the capital in investment funds that generate monthly dividends. This, added to your pension and professionally managed, guarantees you a worry-free old age. And who is going to professionally manage my money? Your children, naturally. They know your needs and can make the best decisions for your future. It was a perfect trap. My own children had built a legal net that stripped me of everything under the pretext of protecting me, my economic independence, my home, my freedom of choice, all wrapped in a package that sounded like care and filial responsibility. And what if I don't want to sign? The silence that followed was deafening. David and the lawyer exchanged a look that needed no translation. Mom, don't make this harder than necessary. We've spoken with your primary care doctor, Dr. Peterson. He agrees that you need more supervision. Dr. Peterson, when did you talk to him? Last week. We explained your erratic behavior with money, your tendency to give away family resources to strangers, your refusal to accept help. He understands that it's part of the natural aging process. My primary care doctor, who had treated me for years, who knew perfectly well that my mind was lucid, had been turned into an ally in this family conspiracy. I wondered what version of the story they had told him to get his complicity. Also, Mom, David continued, we've already spoken with the building manager. We explained that you're moving and that we need to start the selling process. He understands the situation. Every person in my life had been informed of my future before I was. My doctor, the manager, the assisted living facility. Everyone knew that Carol Baker no longer existed as an autonomous person, but as an administrative problem that needed to be efficiently resolved. Patricia is also in agreement, of course, David added, as if that definitively sealed my fate. In fact, she's going to take care of packing your most important things. What you don't need at the facility, we can sell or donate. My things, the objects I had collected during years of life, the photographs of my marriage, the books I had read over and over, my mother's china, the tablecloths I had embroidered during long winter afternoons. Everything reduced to two categories: what you need and what can be sold or donated. David, please, this can't be happening. My son got up from his chair and walked to the window, looking out at the street as if he were already calculating the market value of the view. Mom, I understand this is difficult, but sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions for the good of their children. Now, it's our turn to make difficult decisions for your good. The irony of his words broke my heart. For years, I had made difficult decisions for his good, working double shifts to pay for his private university, mortgaging the house to finance his first business, taking care of his small children every weekend so he and his wife could have a social life. Every decision had been a sacrifice made with love. His decisions were calculations made with coldness. Mr. Johnson spoke again with that paternalistic tone professionals use when they want to convince you that surrendering your life is the most sensible thing you can do. Mrs. Baker, I understand your reservations. It's natural, but think about it. At the facility, you will have companionship, scheduled activities, immediate medical attention if you need it. Here, alone in this large apartment, you are exposed to many risks. What risks? A fall, a heart problem in the middle of the night, a household accident. At your age, any emergency can be fatal if there's no one nearby to help. Everything was designed to make me feel vulnerable, dependent, incapable. My house, which had been my refuge for decades, was now presented as a death trap. My independence was an unacceptable risk. My ability to make decisions was a threat to my own survival. Besides, David added, frankly, Mom, maintaining this apartment no longer makes economic sense. The expenses are too high for one person alone, and the property value is at its highest point in years. It's the perfect time to sell. There was the naked truth. It wasn't about my security or my well-being. It was about liquidating my assets while the real estate market was favorable. I was an investment portfolio that had reached the optimal moment to be converted into cash. That night, after they left with the promise to come back tomorrow to finalize the details, I sat in my favorite armchair and looked around my home for what I suspected would be one of the last times. Every object told me a story. The vase Arthur had given me for our anniversary, the blanket I had knitted during his long illness, the photographs where my children smiled with genuine love when they still hadn't calculated how much my living death was worth. I got up and went to the closet where I kept my important documents. At the back, wrapped in a silk scarf, was my old phone, the one I used before David helped me modernize by buying me a new one. I turned it on with trembling fingers. It still had some battery. It was time to make a call I had been putting off out of pride, out of fear, out of that stupid hope that my children would reconsider and go back to being the people I had raised. I dialed the number of my sister Rose, who lived in Los Angeles. and with whom I had spoken very little in recent years due to old family disputes that now seemed insignificant compared to what I was experiencing. Rose's voice on the other end of the line sounded distant, as if traveling across decades of silence and family grudges that now seemed absurd compared to my current situation. Carol, is that you? It's been years since you called, Sister Rose. My voice broke before I could continue. The tears I had been holding back for weeks finally found their way out. What's wrong, Carol? You sound terrible. Between choked sobs, I told her everything, every detail of David and Patricia's betrayal, every humiliation, every document they wanted me to sign, every right they had snatched from me while I slept, trusting that filial love truly existed. Rose listened in silence, interrupting me only with exclamations of disbelief that confirmed that what I was going through was not normal, that my children had become something monstrous that no mother should have to face. Carol, you have to get out of there immediately. Come to Lowe's Angels. Stay with me for as long as you need. My kids can help you with the legal aspects. Rose, I don't even have money for the train ticket. David has blocked everything. Don't worry about that. I'm going to wire you money right now. Give me the number of an account where you can receive it. I only have the usual account, but David controls it. Do you have any account he doesn't know about? Wait, yes. I have an old savings passbook at the credit union from when I used to work. It barely has dollar, but David doesn't know it exists. Rose reassured me with the big sister authority she had always had, even when we were little girls, and the world seemed to be falling apart over some mischief. She promised me that in hours I would have enough money to escape, to think, to catch my breath before deciding how to face the situation. I hung up the phone, feeling for the first time in weeks that I was not completely alone in the world, but my relief was short-lived. Looking out the window, I saw David's car parked on the street. He had returned, and this time he had Patricia with him. The doorbell rang insistently. Then I heard a key in the lock. Of course, they had never returned the copy I had given them years ago for emergencies. Now, I understood that I was the emergency they wanted to protect themselves from. Mom, where are you? Patricia shouted from the entrance. In the living room, I replied quickly, tucking the old phone into the armchair cushion. They both walked in with serious expressions. Patricia carried a large folder, and David brought an empty cardboard box. Mom, we need to talk seriously, David said in a tone that allowed no argument. Mr. Johnson called us. He says someone tried to access information about your bank accounts from a different computer last night. Have you been talking to anyone about your finances? My heart pounded. How could they know that? I had only called Rose. I hadn't accessed any computer. I don't know what you're talking about, David. Mom, don't lie to us. The bank registers all inquiries. Someone with your personal information has been looking into your accounts. Have you given your details to anyone? Patricia sat across from me with the folder open like a professional interrogator. Mom, we know you called Aunt Rose last night. Mr. Johnson warned us that you might try to seek external help, but that's just going to complicate things for everyone. How do you know I called Rose? Mom, your new phone has a family plan. We can see all the calls you make. It's for security, to know if you have an emergency. My new phone, the gift David had given me so he could be more at ease knowing he could locate me, another instrument of control disguised as filial care. Look, Mom, Patricia continued, we understand that you're scared. It's natural, but involving Aunt Rose is going to create unnecessary legal problems. She lives in Los Angeles. She doesn't know your real situation. And frankly, she's always had a tendency to dramatize things. Dramatize. Patricia, you are taking my house, my money, my freedom. We are protecting you, Mom, but if you keep resisting, if you keep looking for external help to sabotage what we're trying to do for your own good, we're going to have to speed up the process. David pulled more documents from his briefcase and spread them on the table with the precision of someone who had planned every move. Mom, these are the final papers. You have to sign them today. The buyer of the apartment is coming tomorrow to do the final inspection, and the assisted living facility needs payment confirmation before Friday. You've already sold my house without my signature. We've signed a pre-contract, Mom. As de facto guardians, we have the authority to make these decisions when there is a risk that the protected person will make decisions that harm their own well-being. De facto guardians. They hadn't even needed a formal legal process. They had created their own authority based on my supposed incapacity, backed by a doctor who had been manipulated, and a lawyer who only saw dollar bills where I saw a life destroyed. Besides, Mom, Patricia added as she pulled photographs from a folder, we've been documenting behaviors that show you need supervision. She spread several photographs taken without my knowledge on the table. In one, I appeared giving money to Mrs. Johnson in the doorway. In another, helping to carry grocery bags for the elderly woman on the second floor. In a third, sitting on a park bench feeding stray cats with my leftover food. These behaviors demonstrate a lack of economic and social judgment, Mom. Giving money to strangers, getting involved in other people's problems, spending resources on stray animals when you should be saving for your own care. My acts of humanity documented as evidence of dementia, my solidarity with neighbors who had been my friends for years, presented as a symptom of mental deterioration. My compassion for abandoned cats categorized as a waste of family resources. Patricia, those aren't strange behaviors. That's being a good person. Mom, being a good person is fine when you have unlimited resources, but you have a fixed pension and savings that have to last for the rest of your life. You can't afford to be the neighborhood benefactor. David stood up and began walking around the living room, examining my furniture like an appraiser evaluating merchandise. Besides, Mom, we spoke with some neighbors. Mrs. Johnson confirmed that you gave her dollar for her surgery. Mr. Smith admitted that you paid for his heart medicine last month. The family downstairs told us you helped them with dollar when the father lost his job. You've been investigating my relationships with my neighbors. We've been protecting the family assets, Mom. In total, in the last months, you've given away more than dollar. That's more than your entire monthly pension. The word given away bothered me deeply. I hadn't given anything away. I had helped people who needed it, who had been my neighbors and friends for years, who had been there for me in difficult times. But for my children, any dollar that wasn't directed toward them or my own maintenance was an unacceptable waste. Mom, do you realize that if you keep this up in years, you'll have squandered all your savings? What will happen then? Who will take care of you when you don't have money to pay for a private facility? David, I don't want to go to any facility. But you will have to go, Mom, at living alone without family nearby who can supervise you daily. It's inevitable. The only difference is whether you go to a good facility paid for with your own well-managed resources, or if you end up in some horrible place funded by Social Security because you've wasted your assets. It was perfect blackmail. My future was reduced to two equally terrible options. Surrender my freedom now in exchange for a gilded cage, or maintain my independence until poverty forced me into a much worse cage. Patricia closed the folder with a dry snap that sounded like a final sentence. Mom, let's be clear. Aunt Rose can't help you because she doesn't have legal authority over your situation. We do. We can do this the easy way with your cooperation, or we can do it through the courts, but it will be done. And what if I completely refuse? The silence that followed was more eloquent than any threat. David and Patricia exchanged a look that had been rehearsed, planned, calculated. Mom, David said finally, if you refuse, we will start a competency hearing tomorrow. We have the medical report, the photographs of erratic behavior, the bank records showing irresponsible spending, and testimonies from neighbors confirming your deterioration of judgment. The process will take months, during which your assets will be frozen to prevent you from squandering them further. During those 3 months, Patricia added, you won't be able to access your money. You won't be able to sell or buy anything. You won't be able to make any financial decisions. And in the end, the result will be the same. We will obtain legal guardianship, and we will do exactly what we are proposing to do now voluntarily. The difference, David concluded, is that the legal process will cost about $1 in lawyers and court fees, money that will come from your assets naturally. It was the perfect trap. I could surrender my life voluntarily, or I could fight and have it taken by force while paying the costs of my own destruction. In either case, my children would win, and I would lose everything except the illusion of having chosen my destiny. That night, after David and Patricia left with the promise to return first thing the next morning to finalize everything, I sat in my armchair looking at the documents they had left on the table. Each page represented a part of my life that would be torn from my hands. The deed of sale for the apartment, the admission papers for the facility, the authorization for them to manage my pension more efficiently. But something had changed inside me during that conversation. Perhaps it was seeing my acts of kindness photographed as criminal evidence, or hearing my own children talk about me as if I were an investment that had stopped being profitable. The fact is that for the first time in weeks, instead of just feeling despair, I felt something akin to rage. A cold, calculated rage like the one they had used against me. I took the old phone from the cushion and called Rose again. This time my voice sounded different, firmer. "Rose, it's Carol again. Sister, how are you? I've been thinking about you since we spoke. Rose, I need you to do me a very important favor. Can you come to Chicago tomorrow morning?" "Of course. What do you need?" "I want you to go to the bank with me. There are some things I have to do before it's too late." I explained my plan to her, which had been forming in my mind over the last few hours. Rose listened in silence, and when I finished, her response was immediate. "Carol, that sounds dangerous. Are you sure you want to confront them like that?" "Rose, I've spent years being good, being obedient, putting the needs of others before my own, and look where that has got me. My own children treat me worse than a stranger. If they really can start a legal process, let them, but not without a fight, and not without them understanding that their mother is not a senile idiot who is going to let herself be robbed without saying a word." The next morning, Rose arrived on the first train from Los Angeles. I saw her from the window, getting out of a taxi with a small suitcase, and that look of determination on her face that I remembered from our childhood when she defended the smaller kids from the school bullies. She was years old, years younger than me, but she still had that energy that had always characterized her. She had been a lawyer before retiring, and although her specialty wasn't family law, she knew the system well enough not to be intimidated by the Mr. Johnsons of this world. "Sister," she said as soon as she hugged me, "before we go to the bank, I want to see those documents they made you sign." I spread all the papers on the kitchen table, and Rose reviewed them with the meticulousness of someone who had spent decades reading contracts and looking for fine print. "Carol, this is a legal scam. They have used your good faith and your mother's love to build a perfect trap. But is what they've done legal? Technically, yes. But ethically, it's abominable, and there are some things we can do." Rose explained to me that the fact that David had changed the passwords to my accounts without written authorization constituted a crime, that the sale of the apartment without my express consent could be annulled if I filed a complaint quickly, that the supposed medical report they had obtained to declare me incompetent could be countered with an independent evaluation. "But sister, you have to be prepared for this to get very ugly. When they realize that you are defending yourself, they are going to intensify their attacks. Rose, It can't get any uglier than it already is. At least this way, I'll keep my dignity. We arrived at the bank in the morning. I asked to speak with the manager, Mr. Robert Miller, whom I had known for years, because he had handled my apartment's mortgage and all my financial affairs. Mr. Miller was a man in his S, with that professional cordiality that inspired confidence. When Rose and I sat in his office, his expression changed upon seeing my emotional state. "Mrs. Baker, you look very worried. How can I help you?" "Mr. Miller, I believe my son has been making movements in my accounts without my authorization." I explained the whole situation: the theft of the card, the change of passwords, the transfers David had been making, the forced sale of the apartment. Mr. Miller listened with growing attention, taking notes and asking specific questions. "Mrs. Baker, this is very serious. Does your son have any power of attorney over your accounts?" "No, I never signed anything that gave him that authority." Mr. Miller typed on his computer for several minutes, reviewing my account history. "Indeed, I see unauthorized movements here. Your son has been using your personal information to access online banking services and has made transfers totaling $, in the last weeks." "Dollar," I repeated, feeling my breath catch. "Yes, and I also see that he has tried to apply for a personal loan of $, using your apartment as collateral." Rose took my hand under the table while Mr. Miller continued to review the records. "Mrs. Baker, this constitutes a crime of misappropriation of funds and possible bank fraud. We can immediately block all accounts to prevent further unauthorized movements, and I am obliged to report these irregularities to the relevant authorities." "What exactly does that mean?" "It means we are going to freeze all accounts until the legal situation is clarified. Your son will not be able to make any more movements, but you will not have access to the funds either until a judge determines exactly what happened." Rose leaned forward in her chair. "Mr. Miller, is there any way my sister can access the money she needs for basic expenses while this is being resolved?" "We can open a new account exclusively in Mrs. Baker's name with a card that only she knows. Any new money that comes in, such as your monthly pension, will be deposited there safely." It was exactly what I needed: an account David couldn't touch, couldn't empty, couldn't control. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was regaining some power over my own life. "Mr. Miller, I want to do that, and I want to file a formal complaint against my son." The bank manager looked at me with an expression that mixed respect and sadness. "Mrs. Baker, I understand that it must be very painful to make this decision. Are you absolutely sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." While Mr. Miller prepared the documents, Rose and I waited in his office. Through the window, I could see the street where I had walked so many times with David when he was little, where I had taught him to ride a bicycle, where we had shared ice cream on summer afternoons when the world seemed like a safe and predictable place. "Carol, are you okay?" Rose asked me. "I'm fine." For the first time in weeks, I'm fine. I signed all the necessary documents, the new account, the complaint for misappropriation of funds, the revocation of any access David might have had to my finances. Each signature felt like an act of liberation, as if I were recovering pieces of my soul that had been stolen along with my money. Mr. Miller handed me the new debit card with a genuinely happy smile. Mrs. Baker, this card is exclusively yours. No one else can access this account. No one else knows the number. No one else can change the PINs. Your pension will be deposited here automatically next Monday. I put the card in my purse as if it were a magical talisman. It was small, made of normal plastic, but it represented something much bigger. My recovered independence. When we left the bank, Rose suggested we have coffee at the cafe across the street to plan the next steps. Carol, what are you going to do when David finds out what you've done? I don't know, Rose, but for the first time in weeks, that question doesn't scare me. And what if they really try the competency hearing? Then I'll fight. I'll find another doctor. I'll hire a lawyer. I'll do whatever it takes to prove that I am perfectly sane and that the only thing I did wrong was raise 2 children who confuse love with weakness. Rose smiled and raised her coffee cup as if it were a glass of champagne. To sisters who don't give up, she toasted. To sisters who defend themselves, I replied, feeling for the first time in a long time that I had something to fight for. That afternoon, while Rose was organizing her things in the guest room that had remained empty since my grandchildren's last visit, I received a call on the landline. It was David, and his voice sounded different. It was no longer the paternalistic and condescending tone of the last few weeks. It was pure rage. Mom, what have you done? I protected my money, son, something you should have been doing instead of stealing it from me. Stealing it, Mom. I was responsibly managing your resources, and now because of you, everything is blocked. How are we going to pay for the facility? How are we going to complete the sale of the apartment? We're not going to do any of that, David, because I haven't authorized any of that. The silence on the other end of the line was long and tense. When David spoke again, his voice had a tone I had never heard before, cold and threatening. Mom, I hope you know what you're doing, because this is going to have consequences you haven't considered. Are you threatening me, David? I'm warning you. Tomorrow we're going to come with the lawyer, and this time it's not going to be a friendly conversation. He hung up without saying goodbye. But for the first time in weeks, the sound of the phone cutting off didn't scare me. It sounded like freedom. The next day, just as he had promised, David showed up at my door, accompanied not only by Mr. Johnson, but also by Patricia and an older woman I didn't recognize, dressed in a formal suit and carrying a voluminous folder. Mom, this is Dr. Margaret Miller, a psychiatrist specializing in geriatrics, David announced in a tone meant to sound official. She's here to do an evaluation of your current mental state. Rose, who was with me in the living room, stood up immediately. Excuse me, But who authorized this evaluation? Mr. Johnson stepped forward with that false smile he had perfected for awkward situations. Ma'am, I understand you are Mrs. Baker's sister. But in this case, the children have the authority to request medical evaluations when there is well-founded concern about the elderly person's decision-making capacity. Well-founded concern. Rose responded with the authority of someone who had spent decades arguing in court. Based on what? That my sister decided to protect her own money from being stolen. The tension in the room was palpable. Patricia sat down without being invited and spread more documents on my dining table, as if my house were already an office to manage my own destruction. Aunt Rose, we understand you want to protect Mom, but the situation has escalated in a worrying way. Yesterday, Mom filed a criminal complaint against David. Does that seem like the action of a person with all her mental faculties? It seems like the action of a person who is defending herself from theft, Rose replied without batting an eye. Dr. Miller, who had remained silent observing the interaction, cleared her throat. Mrs. Baker, I am Dr. Miller. Could we speak privately so I can ask you some routine questions? No, I replied with a firmness that surprised myself. Any evaluation you want to do, you can do in front of my sister. She is my legal representative right now. David turned red with anger. Mom, Rose can't be your legal representative. We are your children. We have the legal responsibility for your well-being. The same responsibility that led you to steal dollar from me, I asked him, watching his face change from red to an ashen color. Mr. Johnson quickly intervened. Mrs. Baker, those are very serious accusations. Your son was responsibly managing your resources, seeking better returns for your capital. Better returns. Rose pulled a folder from her purse. Are you referring to the dollar he tried to take out as a loan using my sister's apartment as collateral without her knowledge? Or the unauthorized transfers he made to his personal accounts? The silence that followed was devastating. Dr. Miller looked alternately at David and the lawyer, clearly uncomfortable with the situation they had put her in. Patricia tried to regain control of the conversation. Dr. Miller, as you can see, the family situation is very tense. Our mother is being influenced by external people who do not understand her true condition. My true condition, I interrupted her. Patricia, my true condition is that of a year-old woman with all her mental faculties intact, who discovered that her own children were systematically robbing her. Dr. Miller got up from her chair, putting the forms she had brought back into her briefcase. Gentlemen, I believe there is a misunderstanding about the nature of my visit. I am here to evaluate Mrs. Baker's cognitive capacity, not to mediate family disputes over money. And from what I can observe, the lady is perfectly lucid and coherent in her responses. David stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the coffee cup Patricia had served without asking. Doctor, you don't understand the situation. My mother has been having erratic behavior for months. She gives money to strangers. She refuses to accept help. She lives alone in an apartment that is too big for her. Mr. Baker, the doctor replied with professional patience, helping neighbors in need, preferring independence, and choosing where to live are personal decisions, not symptoms of dementia. Your mother expresses herself clearly, remembers specific details, understands the consequences of her actions, and makes decisions consistent with her values. I see no indication of cognitive deterioration. Mr. Johnson tried a new strategy. Doctor, but don't you consider it worrying that a person of her age files a criminal complaint against her own children? Doesn't that suggest some kind of paranoia or distortion of reality? Dr. Miller looked at him with an expression bordering on professional contempt. Sir, if a person of any age discovers that they have been stolen from, filing a complaint is the most rational and appropriate response possible. In fact, not doing so could indicate deterioration of judgment. Part 5b, The Truth and the Threat. Patricia tried one last emotional appeal. Mom, please don't do this. We are your family. Everything we have done has been with your well-being in mind. Do you really want to destroy our relationship over money? Patricia, I replied with a calm I didn't know I possessed. Our relationship was destroyed the moment you decided that my pension was yours, the moment you documented my acts of kindness as evidence of dementia, the moment you conspired to take away my home, my freedom, and my dignity. But Mom, we love you. No, Patricia, you love my money. You see me as an obstacle to accessing it. David, who had been holding back his rage throughout the conversation, finally exploded. Fine, Mom. If you want to play this game, we're going to play. But when you're alone, when you have no one to take care of you, when you need help and no one is there, don't come crying to us. David, I've been weeks without anyone taking care of me because you weren't caring. You were only looting. Rose stood up and accompanied the doctor to the door. Dr. Miller, thank you very much for your professionalism. Could you provide us with a written report of your evaluation? Of course, I will send it to you in the next few days. And Mrs. Baker, she addressed me, if you need a second medical opinion for any legal process, do not hesitate to contact me. Your mental state is perfectly normal for a person your age. After they all left, Rose and I sat in silence for several minutes. The apartment felt strangely empty after so much tension and so many raised voices. Carol, how do you feel? Tired, very tired, but also relieved somehow. Relieved, yes, because I no longer have to pretend that my children love me. I no longer have to justify their behavior by telling myself they are doing it for my own good. Now, I know the truth, and even though it hurts, at least I can make decisions based on reality. Rose took my hand. Carol, what do you want to do now? I want to live my life. I want to decide where to spend my money, where to live, whom to help. I want to be myself without asking anyone for permission. And if they try to take this further legally, then we'll have to be prepared. But Rose, for the first time in months, I'm not afraid. I have my money protected. I have a medical report that certifies my capacity. And I have someone who supports me. That evening, while Rose was preparing dinner in my kitchen, as we had done when we were girls, I received a call from Mr. Miller at the bank. Mrs. Baker, I have news about the investigation of your accounts. We have tracked exactly where the money your son transferred without authorization went. Where did it go? A portion was used to pay Mr. David Baker's personal debts. Another portion was transferred to a joint account he has with his wife, and a considerable amount was invested in bitcoins using a cryptocurrency platform. Bitcoins? Yes, ma'am. It seems your son was speculating with your money in the cryptocurrency market. Unfortunately, according to our records, those investments have lost approximately % of their value in the last weeks. The world wobbled under my feet. Not only had David stolen from me, but he had lost a large part of that money gambling on investments I never would have authorized. Mr. Miller, what does that mean for the recovery of my funds? It means that recovery will be more complicated. We can track the direct transfers and force their return. But the money lost in cryptocurrency, that's going to be harder to recover. I hung up the phone and sat in my armchair, feeling the full weight of the betrayal. Not only had they robbed me, but they had gambled with my life savings as if they were casino chips. Rose sat next to me. What happened? David bet my money on bitcoins and lost it. Rose hugged me as I cried, not from sadness, but from a rage so pure that its intensity surprised me. Carol, we are going to recover every dollar we can, and we are going to make sure David understands the consequences of what he has done. Do you know what hurts me the most, Rose? What? That for years I thought I had raised children, but what I actually raised were predators who were just waiting for the right moment to devour me. The next few days passed in a strange calm, like the silence before a storm. David and Patricia did not appear again, but their absence had something threatening about it, as if they were planning their next move in the shadows. Rose had decided to stay with me until the situation stabilized, and for the first time in months, my apartment felt like a home again instead of a prison. On Monday morning, as we were having a quiet breakfast, the doorbell rang. It was a messenger with a certified letter addressed to me. Rose opened it, and her expression immediately changed. Carol, it's a court summons. David has formally initiated the competency hearing process. I read the document with trembling hands. The legal language was intimidating, full of terms that turned my life into an administrative file. According to the papers, I was a person in a vulnerable situation who required urgent asset protection due to erratic financial behavior that put my economic resources at risk. Rose, what exactly does this mean? It means we have days to prepare a defense. But Carol, don't worry. We have Dr. Miller's evaluation the bank records that prove David stole from you, and testimonies from neighbors who can attest to your normal mental state. That same afternoon, Rose accompanied me to the office of a lawyer specializing in family law, whom she had contacted through her old colleagues. His name was Jonathan Smith. He was in his S, and he had that contained energy of someone who had seen enough injustices to take them personally. Mrs. Baker, I have reviewed your case, and I want to be completely honest with you. Your son has built a very well-planned legal strategy. He has photographs, testimonies from neighbors, and he has managed to get some local merchants to sign statements about your strange expenditures. What kind of statements? For example, the florist says you buy flowers every week to take to the cemetery, spending about $1 a month. The butcher testifies that you sometimes buy meat to give to the stray cats. The pharmacist confirms that you pay for medicine for neighbors who cannot afford it. But that's not illegal, is it? No, Mom, but your son is presenting it as evidence of asset dissipation and loss of economic reality. He is building a portrait of an old woman who wastes her resources on irrational behavior. Rose leaned forward in her chair. Jonathan, what are our chances of winning? Good, especially with the psychiatric evaluation and the bank records. But we have to be prepared for this to get very personal and very painful. Your son is going to try to present every act of kindness as a symptom of dementia. We left the lawyer's office with a clear strategy, but with a heavy heart. I knew that the coming months would be a battle, not only for my money and my freedom, but for the right to be judged on my own merits rather than by prejudices about the age and capacity of older women. That night, while Rose was organizing documents on the dining table, I received an unexpected call. It was my eldest grandson, Alexander, David's son, who was years old. Grandma, can we talk? Of course, Alexander. How are you? Confused, Grandma. Very confused. Dad told me his version of what's happening, but something doesn't add up for me. I explained the whole situation to him from my perspective, without omitting any details. Alexander listened in silence, asking occasional questions that showed he was genuinely trying to understand the truth. Grandma, is it true that Dad took $1 from you without permission? It's true, Alexander, and that he lost it speculating on bitcoins. That is also true. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Grandma, I need to see you. Can I come tomorrow? Of course, son. The next day, Alexander arrived mid-morning. He was a serious young man who had studied economics and worked at a financial consulting firm. Since he was little, he had been different from his father, more thoughtful, less obsessed with money and status. Grandma, I've been thinking about what you told me yesterday, and I checked some things. What kind of things? Dad asked me for money 2 months ago. He told me it was for a safe investment that would generate good dividends for you. I lent him $1 of my savings. And now I understand that this safe investment was gambling your money on cryptocurrency without your knowledge. and that my money was probably also lost in that bet. Rose, who had been listening from the kitchen, joined us in the living room. Alexander, would you be willing to testify about that if necessary? More than willing. I'm furious. Not only with Dad, but with myself for being so naive. Alexander, it's not your fault for trusting your father. Grandma, there's something else you need to know. Mom and Dad have been talking about selling your apartment and using the money to buy a bigger house. They've already been looking at properties in the Chicago suburbs, houses that cost $1 that they could only afford with the money from the sale of your house. The puzzle was starting to come together. Everything had been planned. Taking away my independence, liquidating my assets, and using my inheritance to finance their lifestyle upgrade. I was literally the goose that laid the golden eggs that they had decided to sacrifice. Alexander, does your father know you're here? No, and I prefer that he doesn't find out for now. But Grandma, I want you to know that you have at least one family member who supports you. That afternoon, Alexander stayed for lunch with us. For the first time in months, my table was filled with cheerful conversation, genuine laughter, the kind of affectionate exchange I remembered from when my grandchildren were little and visited me every Sunday. Grandma, what are you going to do if you win the lawsuit? First, I'm going to get my money back. Then, I'm going to live my life the way I want to live it. And what if Dad and Aunt Patricia try to reconcile with you afterward? The question made me reflect deeply. For months, I had fantasized about the moment my children would realize their mistake, apologize, and we would be a family again. But now, after everything that had happened, after seeing the calculated coldness with which they had planned my destruction, that fantasy seemed not only impossible, but undesirable. Alexander, there are damages that cannot be repaired. There are trusts that once broken cannot be rebuilt. Your parents didn't make an impulsive mistake. They systematically planned to steal my dignity, my freedom, and my assets. That's not something that's fixed with an apology. But won't you miss having family? I have family, Alexander. I have you. I have Rose. And I have neighbors who have shown me more loyalty and affection in the last few months than your parents have in years. Rose smiled from the other side of the table. Carol, have you thought about what you want to do when this is over? You know what? I want to travel. I've spent years taking care of others, sacrificing my desires for the needs of my family. I want to see Portugal. I want to see Italy. I want to sit on a terrace in Paris and have a coffee without having to justify the expense to anyone. And the apartment, I'm going to keep it. It's my home. It's full of my memories with Arthur, and no one is going to kick me out of here. But I'm also going to hire an aide to come twice a week. Not because I need her, but because I can afford it, and because it will give me peace of mind. Alexander looked at me with something that seemed like admiration. Grandma, you sound like a free woman. For the first time in my life, Alexander, I feel like a free woman. That night, after Alexander left, promising to stay in touch and support me during the judicial process. Rose and I sat on the patio with a glass of wine. The October air was cool but pleasant, and the lights of Chicago twinkled before us like promises of infinite possibilities. Carol, are you sure this is what you want? Once we win this lawsuit, there will be no turning back with David and Patricia. Rose, do you know the difference between being alone and feeling lonely? No. When you are alone but at peace with yourself, that is freedom. When you are surrounded by people who hurt you, that is loneliness. That night, in the hotel room overlooking the sea, I wrote in the diary I had started after the trial. Dear diary, today marks 1 year since I got my life back, not the day of the trial, but the day I made the decision to defend myself. I have learned that freedom is not the absence of responsibilities, but the ability to choose which ones you accept. I have learned that family is not a genetic accident, but a daily choice of love and mutual respect. I have learned that years is not too late to start living for oneself. I had discovered something that many people do not learn in a lifetime, that self-love is not selfishness, but survival. That setting boundaries is not cruelty, but self-respect. That saying no to those who hurt you does not make you a bad person, but an intelligent person. For the first time in my life, I had become the protagonist of my own story. And that story, far from having ended, was just beginning.